Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome everybody to Season 2, Episode 28 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we help you prevail throughout Week 4 and the rest of the 2022 fantasy football season. I'm your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me is Nick Cap. Just a little advisory for you guys listening out there. I am being affected by the hurricane. I'm in Orlando, so I'm relatively safe-ish, I think. We'll see if I'm underwater by the time Friday comes. But for now, on Wednesday, September 28th, at like 2 o'clock p.m., I am safe. With that said, I anticipate losing power tonight. Me and Nick are recording both Thursday and Friday's episodes right now. So we're going to go back to back, and that's just kind of how we're doing things. We do have injury news for you. We have projections for Thursday Night Football. We wish we could record a little bit later tonight to have more accurate information, I guess, but we're working with what we can. Same with Friday's show. We'll say the same thing. So with that said, if this is your first time listening to us, thank you so much. We appreciate you joining us. We do this show on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. You can find it on all audio streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, Anchor. If you're on iTunes, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. If you'd rather watch the show and listen to the show at the same time, you can go to our YouTube channel, PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. That will give you the video and audio versions of the show. We do a fifth show every week. It's our live show Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. I hope we're doing a live show this Sunday. Stay tuned to our social media platforms for that one. I'm determined to find a way to record live on Sunday. Whether it's at my house, I have to ask my boss if I could go and stream there. My girlfriend's house. I'm determined to find a place to record the live show on Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. We should still be there. Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can find that show. We get a lot of questions. Ask your questions. That's going to bring you right into the 9:30 a.m. London game on Sunday. Please keep following us and connecting with us on social media. That's actually where you're going to hear all of our updates over the next few days as I'm still dealing with this weather pattern. Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram is PrimeTimeFFPod. Facebook and YouTube is PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. Let's get into some injury updates and some news. Again, we're recording Wednesday, the 28th at 2 o'clock Eastern Time. So we don't have all the practice reports yet from Wednesday. We're trying our best. First off, Tua Tagovailoa, back and ankle injury. This one's a little bit tricky because it's for Thursday Night Football, which is what we're talking about today. McDaniel has listed him as questionable, but they didn't practice due to the hurricane. I believe the Dolphins flew out yesterday morning or this morning due to the hurricane. They flew up to Cincinnati. I believe from what I read is that Tua would have practiced in a limited fashion on Tuesday if they had practice. So I think we're assuming that he's playing, but again, we probably won't know until Thursday. So Nick, let's assume he's playing a little banged up. How does that affect the Dolphins players? Tua's out there while injured.
We'll get more in depth into it, but just as a brief overstatement, I think they're going to need those weapons more than ever if Tua's not 100%. Back angle, his arm is not the strongest in the league. Like, he's probably not going to have the deep arm that he showed in week 2 against the Ravens. So I don't think you're going to see that type of game from him. But I do think we're going to see more of what we predicted before the season, where you'll see them have to be efficient on those 15-yard plays. You'll have to see Waddle and Tyreek catch the ball and get yards after the catch versus being able to get one of those 40, 50-yard break the game open types of plays. So it's definitely hurts him. It definitely affects him. I don't think he's going to play 100% if he does play. And there, of course, is the chance that he sits. But at least it's on a Thursday night game, not a Monday night where you have to make your lineup predictions beforehand.
Going on to Sterling Shepard, he tore his ACL in Monday's game. If he was rostered in your league, I think it was about 50%, and he's going to be dropped. That's kind of it. This gives a chance for Kadarius Toney to step up, one of those other Giants wide receivers. But this just feels like the Giants every single year as their star receiver gets hurt. And Daniel Jones, we haven't really gotten to see what kind of quarterback he could be because of situations like this. Going on to New Orleans Saints wide receivers and beloved Jameis Winston. Jarvis Landry did not practice Wednesday due to an ankle injury. Michael Thomas didn't practice due to a toe injury. Jameis Winston didn't practice due to a back injury. Andy Dalton took the first team snaps. I'm not super duper worried about Landry or Thomas. I think they'll be good to go Sunday. Same with Jameis. We'll just hopefully have an update for you guys on Sunday's show. But as for now, that's all we got. This is one that Nick's going to want to talk about. Zach Wilson has been medically cleared from his knee injury. He will be starting at Pittsburgh on Sunday with 60,000 terrible towels waving in his face.
The GOAT is returning. The first time we are going to see Zach Wilson in year 2. In my opinion, the Jets offense has looked not great with Flacco, but I put most of it on Flacco. I think Wilson is actually going to open up a lot of things for those young receivers over there. So I'm very excited, as not only as a Jets fan, but as a football fan, as an owner of Breece Hall, Michael Carter, Elijah Moore, and Garrett Wilson across my leagues.
Amon-Ra St. Brown with his ankle injury that he suffered in week 3. He did play through the injury. They're optimistic about it. There's a chance he still misses game week 4 against the Seattle Seahawks, which is a phenomenal matchup. They're going to be cautious with it, and he did not practice on Wednesday. Stay tuned for those practice reports. If he doesn't practice by Friday, he's probably ruled out. If he practices limited by Friday, I'm sure he plays. Keenan Allen's hamstring injury is expected to practice this week in full, and he's also expected to play against Houston. It is Houston. DeAndre Swift's shoulder injury did not practice Wednesday. This was expected. He is not expected to play Sunday against Seattle in, again, a phenomenal matchup. David Montgomery, knee and ankle is day-to-day. Probably won't have an update on him until Sunday. I hope he doesn't play, honestly, because I'm a Khalil Herbert owner in 2 leagues and he's resting the Giants. Mac Jones' knee did not practice on Wednesday.
I thought it was his ankle, Mac Jones.
I read knee, ankle. He did
leg
injury. It's his leg injury. He did not practice. Belichick's not ruling him out for Sunday, but I think we're going to see.
I highly doubt he plays. I think he's going to miss multiple weeks.
I think so too. Okay, we're going to move on to our Thursday night football preview. We're going to talk about each position, their projection, tell you if it's over, under, give you a full preview for tonight's game that hopefully I'll be watching. As long as I'm still sitting on my couch and not dead or underwater, I'll be watching it on a phone or something, hopefully. I have like 3 portable chargers and a computer. Like I'm prepared to make it to Thursday and then see what happens. Anyway, let's start with the quarterbacks. Tua Tagovailoa is projected 18.3 points. I think he's like the quarterback 4 on the year or something like that. He's right now the quarterback. He's got to be top 10. 1, 2, 3, 4. He's 5 on the year, and he's projected 18.3 over under.
I'm gonna go with under. I don't think that arm is gonna be too good with all his injuries and his illness. And I know they say he doesn't have a concussion. We all saw that wobbliness. I think he's still gonna be feeling fatigue or long-term effects of it, whether they actually want to admit he has it or not. I don't trust Tua this week, even though it would have been a great matchup for all these players on Thursday night.
Now, the thing is, the Bengals defense is third against quarterbacks in terms of fantasy points right now. Now, they haven't faced the best talent. They face Mitch Trubisky, Cooper Rush, and Joe Flacco. So it's kind of hard to gauge how good Cincinnati's defense really is against quarterbacks, but I'm with Nick. To get to 18.1 or something like that, he's really going to need to throw like 3 touchdowns probably, and I don't see that happening. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game from both teams. I could see it being like a 20-17 game or something like that, which to me is low scoring. So I'm going to go under for that. What about Joe Burrow? Nick is not a Joe Burrow guy. I am a Joe Burrow guy. He's played better than a bunch of quarterbacks that were drafted around his ADP. 18.4. What do you got for me?
He's going up against the worst team to opposing fantasy quarterbacks. I think you just have to trust him and say, hey, I know you haven't had the best fantasy games yet. He's pretty much delivered on his ADP, but he's still being outperformed by some of those guys you thought he would outperform. It's a good matchup. It's a perfect matchup. He should be able to go for over 19, 20 points fairly easily, which would give him a top 5 week if it was last week. So I think Burrow has to be a lock this week in your lineup.
Yeah, I think Burrow should have a good game. I think he could have close to 20 points. Like I said, I think it's going to be a 20-17 game or so. So I think he does have to score all the touchdowns. I think if Mixon gets in the end zone at the beginning of the game, I'm not as confident. Because I think Burrow needs to score 2 to 3 touchdowns to get to 20 in standard scoring leagues. But moving on to the wide receivers, let's start with Tyreek Hill, 19.5 fantasy points. That's a pretty big number. We're talking standard ESPN PPR league. So that's a pretty big number.
That's a very high number, but like I said, I do think they're going to have to rely on 10, 15-yard passes in full PPR. This should really be a Tyreek show. And as he said, he has his eyes out for Eli Apple. He wants to show him up after what happened last year in the AFC Championship game. I think he's going to. He's clearly more talented. I think Tyreek should have a monster day, even if he doesn't catch a 50-yard bomb. I would predict he catches 10 balls for over 100 yards, which would break the 20 points.
I'm going slightly under, around like 17 points. Should be a nice game, but slightly under. What about his partner in crime, Jalen Waddle, 18.1?
I think it's kind of the same thing where I think he's going to be able to be productive on those short passes. But Waddle's the one I'm a little more concerned about. In week 1, you saw a little bit of the Tyreek effect where Waddle had 4 catches on 5 targets for 70 yards and found the end zone, which gave him 17.7, which would be a little bit under his projection right now for this game. So I'm going to go slightly under. I do think he has the upside to break through it, but I don't think he has as big of a ceiling in this matchup.
But even with the Tyreek effect, I mean, like last week, Waddle outscored Tyreek. He had 15. Tyreek had 5. So I just think it's going to be it's a Buck situation. I think there's going to be weeks where they're both productive, and I think there's going to be weeks where one outscores the other by a wide margin. I think this is one where they're both productive. I'm still going to hit the under, though. I'm going to say right at 17. I think both these guys are right at 17. I think whichever one outscores the other scores the touchdown. I know it's not a hot take by any means. Whoever scores a touchdown is probably scoring more points, but I think one of them can go over with a touchdown and the other one will be right around 16, 17. So I'll go with the safe number, both of them slightly under at 17. Let's head over to the Bengals. Jamar Chase, 19.5 fantasy points. That is a high number.
It's a high number, but Thursday night football, prime time. It's time for Jamar Chase to show that he is one of those top receivers in the league. He hasn't been bad for football, but he has not been the wide receiver 3 drafted off your board so far. Back-to-back weeks under 13 points, which is not great, but one against Dallas, once against the best cornerback in football, Sauce Gardner. So I'm going to say that he hits the over in this matchup. Miami has let up too many deep balls to too many wide receivers, and Jamar Chase, to me, is the best deep ball catcher in the league at the moment. So Jamar should get the big touchdown and should have no problem breaking that 19.
I am going to say under. That's just it's a high number to me, and an offense is going to spread the ball around a little bit. He needs a touchdown to hit this number. I know we just said it with the other receivers. I'm going to go slightly under around 16. I'm liking Higgins a bit more in this matchup, especially I don't know if Xavier Howard's playing, but if he is, I like Higgins a bit more. So let's go to Higgins, 14.6.
I think that's a good line. Isn't that pretty much where he finished with last week, I think, even though he exited for a period of time? I'll go slightly over. I don't think he has a massive boom, but I think 15 to 17 is more than achievable for him.
I'm going over. I'm looking at 16 to 20 for Higgins this week. Go to the running backs. Going to start with Miami's Chase Edmonds, 11.2.
He's still getting out-touched by Mostert the last 2 weeks. I'm going to have to say the under. The only time he outscored that was when he had 2 touchdowns last week against Buffalo. Can he get 2 touchdowns on the ground again? Sure, but I would bet more often than not a guy like Chase Edmonds would go under 2 touchdowns. So I'm going to say slightly under.
I'll say under as well. Joe Mixon, 17.2.
It's another good line. I'm going to go under. I think they'll be able to get the touchdowns deep and in the air, so there won't be as big of a need for Mixon as there would be in other matchups that they'll have. So I'll go under, but I think the projections for all these guys have been pretty accurate on ESPN's part so far.
Yeah, I'm going to go slightly under at around 15 again, unless he gets in the end zone. But he's been more of a PPR back this year. I think he's caught more balls than a couple of those other guys that you drafted to be quote unquote PPR back. So I think he's averaging like 5 targets a game or something like that.
He's not 20 catches, so.
He's not being out targeted by Pirine, so they're viewing him as a 3-down back, which is what we all wanted. So I'll go slightly under at around 15. The other thing I do want to mention is the Dolphins, to me, they're not going to win this game, and I think they have a chance to not get blown out, but I think they have a chance to lose by 10 points. They're traveling, didn't practice, banged up on a week that they had a grueling game against Buffalo. And on top of that, like the hurricane and everything, like everything's kind of working against Miami, which I guess in theory could then turn to, they could end up shocking the world, but I think the Bengals have a chance to win by like 10 points. Let's go to the tight ends. Mike Gesicki's at 4.3.
That's just too low of projection. Cincinnati has allowed the 10th most points to the tight end position, so Gesicki should do over that, but I still wouldn't want to play him.
Yeah, he's averaging over 5 points. So I'll go with the over, but I would look for other options as well. Okay. Hayden Hurst is projected 8.2. What do you think?
I'll take the over because I do think Cincinnati is going to be able to put up points fairly easily in this game. So I'll take the over because I think there's a good potential for a touchdown, but I still wouldn't want to play him. I think there's better plays out there.
I'm going to go slightly under, somewhere between 7 and 8. So very slightly under. All right, Nick, who's going to be your MVP of this game?
I already said it. I think it's going to be Jamar Chase. I think he's going to be able to catch a deep ball touchdown. I know that offensive line hasn't held up too well in week 1 and week 2, but they actually did a fairly solid job against the Jets last week. Burrow was doing a good job creating time and separation. So Burrow should have been sacked more than he actually was, but he did a very good job creating time for himself, and that's just going to open up the deep ball all day for Jamar Chase. And like we just said, Miami's allowed the most points to opposing fantasy receivers. Jamar Chase should have himself a monster day.
I'm going to go with T. Higgins. I think T. Higgins is actually going to outscore Jamar Chase, get his first touchdown of the season. I don't think he scored against Dallas, did he? I forget. He may have scored against Dallas.
I think he did.
I think he did. So I think Higgins gets in the end zone today.
Yeah,
I think he does have his first 100-yard game of the season, which he was very close to last week. So I'm going to go with Higgins. Who is your bust of this game?
Mine's probably going to be Tua. I can't see him performing too well. I think the projection's a little high for him at 18. I think it's a little misleading with all the injury stuff he's going through. I can't see him delivering. Last week, 18.3 would have been a top 10 week. So I can't see him finishing as top 10 given all of his injury status.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Tua is the bust of the week. And do you have a sleeper for this one, possibly?
The only person that I could really see like performing, because they did last week when they stepped in for Higgins, was Tyler Boyd. But I think there's better wide receiver 3 plays out there. But if Boyd did put up a monster week, I mean, this is the defense to go ahead and do it against.
I'm going to go with Raheem Mostert, only for the reason that if he catches a couple balls and breaks one out, which he's done before in his career, and you're in a super duper bonus league like me and Nick are in, if he breaks one off for 50 yards on a reception or something, that's going to be mega bonus points. So that's if you do decide to play him. I personally would not play him, but if you're playing like daily fantasy and need a low money guy, he might be a guy to target. All right, that is our Thursday show. I know it's a little bit short, but that's kind of how Thursdays are. It's just kind of the Thursday Night Football preview, and we don't have all the injury news that we need. Check in with us tomorrow, Friday, September or October. Is it October? I don't even know. I got to look at the date. It's October.
It'll be the 30th.
So September 30th. Friday, September 30th, come check in with us. Friday show, we have our all boom team or all bust team. Then we have a super flex segment, not super flex, I should say, but a flex segment. We give you 2 players from each team, and we'll let you know which one we'd rather play in each game. We probably will not have injury updates for you. The way that we're kind of doing the show is we're recording our Friday show right after this one. If I, for some miracle of power on Thursday night, we're actually going to re-record and just do the injury segment, but we're going to prepare you for this weekend as best as we can. You can find that show on all audio streaming platforms, just like this one: iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, basically anywhere where you find a podcast, you find us, the Primetime Fantasy Podcast. If you are on iTunes, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. It really does help us a lot. If you're on YouTube and you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We'd appreciate all of that. Stay tuned on our social medias: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, PrimeTimeFFPod, and then Facebook and YouTube, Primetime Fantasy Podcast. Best of luck tonight in Thursday Night Football, guys. Enjoy the game and get ready for week 4.